Come all you jolly Shanty boys that put the shanty and go.
Necessity is said to be the mother of invention, and nowhere is this more evident than in the lumber towns.
It was technology that had the biggest impact on the harvest of the prized lumber. New inventions made getting the wood out of the forest faster and more efficient. It increased the amount of wood harvested and decreased the lifespan of the industry.
Technology was an ongoing occurrence with the loggers. Some of the things like the improvements on saws, axes, various tools that they invented on the spot to allow them to get the job done.
During the early years, woodsmen relied on sleighs to haul the logs to the river, but these could only be used when the temperatures dipped below freezing and a frozen track could be formed. The first big wheel was manufactured by Silas Overpack in his wagon shop in 1870. Because the big wheel didn't need a frozen track to run on, it became a very popular method to haul logs out of the woods.
This wheel consisted of a pair of wagon type of wheels made out of wood with a metal rim, an axle between them, and a tongue. The tongue could be lifted up in the air, and then a chain hung down from the axle. It would be fastened around the log, and by lowering the tongue and then harnessing it to a pair of horses or oxen, the log could be dragged out because a lot of the log was off the ground. This actually extended the logging period because all the logging was primarily done in the wintertime prior to this invention.
The invention of the narrow gauge railroad was another breakthrough for the industry. Lightweight tracks were laid to where the men were harvesting the timber. A small engine and rail cars were then used to haul out the logs.
With the introduction of the narrow gauge logging railroad, things changed forever. The railroads were able to go out into all of the hinterland and bring logs from there more rapidly than what they would have if they used simply the horse and sleigh and driving them down the water. So they would run out on cheap rails and on cheap rail ties, and then the camps would load their logs on these railroads and they'd haul them to the river or wherever they would be hauling them to. And it was very dependable.
The tracks usually ended at the riverbank. It was here that the logs were pushed off the cars and into the river where they would wait for the next part of their journey. The railroad industry was slow to make tracks into the lumber business. Some of the local lumbermen saw the railroad companies as competition. They were concerned too because sparks from the tracks could cause fires and destroy the trees.
The impact of the railroad when it came into Michigan in 1876 had a tremendous and immediate impact. It took a lot of men, a lot of muscle power, but it was dependable, and that was the main thing.
Large equipment like the logging locomotive and methods of hauling the logs out of the woods were all things that led to shortening the actual era of logging.
In 1884, over 130 sawmills scattered along the river. The once clean river was brown and ugly, clogged with runoff, bark, splintered logs, and broken boards.
Many of the woodsmen who didn't work the drives or return to the farm in the spring ended up working in the mills. Between Saginaw and Bay City along the river, there were 130 lumber mills, and they were located along the river for several reasons. The river was used to transport the logs to the mill. It provided a staging area for the logs that were waiting to be cut, and it was a cost-effective way to distribute the milled lumber by ship. The site of Saginaw's first sawmill was at the end of Mackinac Street. Harvey Williams, or Uncle Harvey as he was known, used a steam engine from a boat to power the saw. John Larkin was one of the few owners to operate a sawmill in an area upstream on the Tittabawassee River. His mill was the second largest operation in the valley. The biggest mills were located downriver in Bay City and Saginaw. During the Saginaw Valley lumber boom, the two Sage McGraw mills in Bay City were the largest sawmills in the world.
Sawmill was not a friendly place to work. They resembled large industrial factories, and there were no OSHA standards, so the workers were exposed to all kinds of health risks, including loud noise, smoke from the different machinery, sawdust all over the place. A typical workday was 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, and during the height of the lumbering era, some mills operated 24 hours a day.
Sawmill buildings were usually two-story operations. Equipment needed to run the blades was located on the first floor and the saws were on the second. The gang saw revolutionized the sawmill productivity. Built by the Wicks brothers of Saginaw and first used at the Sage McGraw Mill, it cut logs into several boards with just one pass.
The gang saw was a vast improvement over the circular saw. This was a steam-powered saw, multi-bladed saw, where the blades could actually be set up for a given width, so you could cut the best width of boards out of a given log. A log would be loaded on a carriage and run through this gang saw in one pass. Very much of an improvement over a circular saw where the log had to be run back and forth through the blade.
Wicks brothers of Saginaw manufactured a gang saw that contained 24 blades that moved up and down like a saber saw. This saw could cut a log 3 foot in diameter with one pass. With a gang saw, a mill could consume a vast amount of logs in a short time.
It was said you could tell a man who worked in the sawmill because he usually was missing a finger. Workers also lost limbs and even their lives to the equipment. Oftentimes, men would fall into the saws or a metal dog would catch and shatter a blade. Breathing problems from the brine wells, which were also operated at the mills, was a serious health concern too.
Mill owners didn't provide health benefits to their workers. If you were injured, you were responsible to seek out and pay for your own medical care. And you were lucky to have a job if you came back, because there was always another person looking for a job who could replace you. So mill owners didn't feel the need to take care of their employees' health needs.
The threat of fires was quite common in sawmills, in part because the buildings themselves were made of wood. Most of the structures around the sawmills were also made of wood. The streets were made of wood, not to mention the fact that there was a lot of sawdust laying around, dry sawdust. The saws themselves produced a lot of friction. That friction could easily ignite a spark that could set the sawmills on fire quite quickly. That's why in a lot of the historic images you'll see barrels along the ridge line, the top ridge line of many of the sawmills, and that was to have water up there in the event that a fire actually happened. They would hope that they could get up there, tip those barrels of water over. If they couldn't at least save the mill, they would hope that it wouldn't spread to the other parts of the sawmill structure compound, as well as spread to the cities.
A fire at the Sample and Camp Sawmill on Ojibwe Island sparked the Great Saginaw Fire of 1893. When it was over, 23 square blocks of the city had been destroyed.
There was an abandoned sawmill on Ojibwe Island, and there was a lot of old sawdust piles laying around. What is believed is that a passing tug threw a spark that quickly caught the sawmill on fire. It was a very windy day, and the fire quickly spread to the main part of Saginaw. In 4.5 hours, it burned over 250 homes and business throughout the city.
In May of 1892, Midlanders suffered one of the worst tragedies of the lumber era in Midland. That tragedy was the explosion of the Midland Salt and Lumber Company, the town's largest employer. Not only did the explosion claim 3 lives, it also essentially wiped out the remnants of the lumber industry in Midland.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.